The art of teaching is the art of assisting discovery. Mark Van Doren. Welcome to another episode of It's Time for Science, and it's time to talk about going back to school. I'm your host, Tom Racine, and my guests today are Dr. Farley Schoeffler, the president of the National Middle Level Science Teachers Association, and award-winning outside educator Rachel Arbor. Dr. Farley Schoeffler is currently the president of the National Middle Level Science Teachers Association, as well as the NMLSTA Awards Committee chair. She is a middle school science teacher near Cleveland, Ohio, and we discuss tips on setting up a science classroom in advance, starting the school year getting kids excited about science, bringing environmental science into the classroom right away, getting kids outside, and resources for teacher burnout. Rachel Arbor is the award-winning CEO of Gaia Scholastic, the New York State lead for Subject to Climate, and the PK through 8 Director of Environmental Education for the Garrison School District. We talk about being at least one day ahead of your students, setting up the classroom for you as well as the kids, tailoring lessons to your local area, and addressing teacher burnout, including Ms. Arbor's own struggle with work-life balance. We also talk about the environmental education work Ms. Arbor does with her own company, Gaia Scholastic, as well as Subject to Climate, a nonprofit with a mission to make climate change teaching and learning accessible to all. It's time for science, and it is time to talk about back-to-school readiness. Many schools start up in August, so that time of year that is somehow simultaneously thrilling and exciting and terrifying and daunting is upon us. But fear not, Dr. Farley Schoeffler, the president of the National Middle Level Science Teachers Association, is here to help. Dr. Schoeffler is a longtime middle school science teacher at Seton Catholic School in Hudson, Ohio, and the mission of the NMLSTA is to support and promote exemplary and innovative middle-level science teaching and learning for all, and to be the advocate for middle-level science teachers and students. So who better to start us off on the topic of back-to-school readiness? So Dr. Schoeffler, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
You are like literally the perfect guest. This is I'm so excited. So I wanted to start off with the big general topic, which is back to school readiness for teachers. You know, the fun time is over, as we say, and it's time to go back. But I want to know, you've been a teacher for 20 plus years. So what thoughts and challenges come to your mind when you're starting a new year?
Maybe the fun time is not over, but the fun time is ahead. You're thinking end of summer, but starting back to school is full of lots of excitement, as you said as well. I think a key idea is organized thinking, and I don't necessarily mean being an organized person. Some people are and some are not. But organized thinking means having a plan for what happens first and second and third. So really being intentional about all those many things, because there are so many. There are thoughts about what to do with my room, what to do with all that paperwork, what about back to school night? And sometimes you get so wrapped up in those things you don't even think about, wait, I also have to think about what I'm going to do with the kids on the first day. So having an outline, a plan is a good way to get started. In fact, 20 years ago, I made a list, and so I use that list every year, and that's my master list. So it has everything on it from the biggest to the smallest. So how many students, where are the lunch menus, how do I log into the textbooks, get my bulletin boards done, get my room set up, get my seating plans done, all of those things. If there's a list and a set of responsibilities, then that takes the stress out of each subsequent year at least, and making that list to start with is the first challenge.
So definitely for newer teachers, start writing all these things down and start taking notes. And I'm assuming
Exactly.
We'll come back to it later in terms of resources. I'm sure that you guys have a lot of resources for teachers. But I also was wondering, how do you set up your classroom for the school year before it gets ready so you can teach science from the get-go? What are some of your tips and tricks maybe for teachers?
I think in terms of how will the kids work best together. So I have lab tables. I have paired lab tables. So I think in terms of how to group those, how to set those up for visibility, for seeing what I'm doing or seeing a screen, but also to enhance talk and communication between the kids. Because if they're talking about science, they're learning about science. So enhancing how they can communicate is good. Bulletin boards or posters or what have you that are attention grabbing, some kids never notice. Some kids notice every day you make a change. And so keeping your room fresh is not extremely demanding, but it is something to keep in your mind, that changing things up a little bit really does catch the attention sometimes of the kids who have the hardest time learning. They're also the most aware of their surroundings. So they're the most receptive to change and color and things like that. And I would also recommend one knows where their things are. So particularly a new teacher, you're coming into a room that may or may not have supplies, may or may not have a closet, and things like that. So having a good idea what you have and where to find it is helpful, instead of that train wreck when you need something and you're starting from scratch and you're not sure what to do.
Are there any science lessons or activities that you recommend starting up? I know we've talked to a recent episode. We talked to nature journaling with John Muir-Laws and things that people can do right away to get kids excited about science right away. Is there anything you suggest that might be a great icebreaker, a great first experiment or activity?
I love the nature journaling. That's a great idea. That is, in fact, something that I do as well. I get the kids outside in the first days of school, in the first couple of weeks of school. Have to know them a little bit, but getting them outside sort of makes that transition from summer to school, from one kind of fun to the other kind of fun in a science classroom. That's helpful. I like to do hands-on things right away, building kinds of activities, cooperative things that have kids building, but building with limitations. So give them supplies, but 1 meter of tape. And then later you can talk about that and talk about the variables that were involved and make it not just an engineering challenge, but science vocabulary challenge. So things that have them working with their peers, talking with their peers, trying things out. It's not wasted time. It's not just playtime. It's going to be connected, but it's going to be connected in ways that get the kids' attention and get that hook that gets them involved and wanting to come back.
A lot of our podcast listeners are elementary science teachers. I know you're a middle level teacher, but a lot of the elementary teachers aren't necessarily trained in science, and sometimes science can be a little bit daunting. Is there any suggestion maybe you have for that, for a teacher who comes to you is like, I'm just a little afraid of science. I've never taught it. My specialty's elsewhere. Any words of advice or support for that?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that lately. In fact, I teach a Girl Scout leader class for Daisy and Brownie Girl Scouts, Daisy Brownie Science. So I think about them when I'm working with those teachers as well. One thing is to use the vocabulary of science. So using words like make observations, make predictions, what is your hypothesis, and doing an analysis, just talking to the kids and saying, okay, let's analyze this. What patterns did we see? Just using the vocabulary of science gives the teacher a little more confidence, but it also brings the kids in. So science is what they're doing. Science is really not a set of facts. Science is a way of thinking and a way of problem solving. So many, many things that we do are science, even if we don't call them that. So lessons that are reading lessons and math lessons can still get connected to things that are happening in the world, or things that children are using, or patterns that they're identifying, or relationships that they're looking at. And all of that is science, even if it didn't come out of a science textbook. Kids, especially small kids, especially elementary kids, they're still willing to admit that they're curious, right? By the time I get them in middle school, they may or may not want to ask questions in front of their peers. But little kids ask. And if teachers can answer and or come back to later when they've found an answer, then they can pull those kids in and they can connect what they're doing, what their standard curriculum is, to what the kids' interests are and what the kids are wondering about the world. And that's science.
I love that that's come up time and time again with the podcast of, kids go in thinking, oh, I'm just going to learn all these facts and figures. But then when the teacher says, I don't know, let's figure that out. It's amazing, like the doors that open for kids. They're like, oh, okay. That's great.
It is. It is. It gives them a chance to investigate, and it also gives them some credibility for their curiosity and gives them some self-confidence.
I'm sure another important aspect of starting the year, especially, is science can be dangerous. There's a lot of things going on in the science classroom. Safety is a big issue. So, how do teachers, how important is that, and how do they approach setting up their classroom and expectations for the kids in terms of safety?
I'm glad you asked that question because it's very, very important. I do start the year with a safety contract, which we go through together, and I remind the children that when you sign something, it's because you know what you're signing. So we go through it together. I do a safety contract, which is really about lab behavior, classroom behavior, and doing things in a way that is not foolhardy and careless by the students. It also includes a piece for taking them outside, their understanding that the rules apply outside as well as inside. I have the parents sign as well so that we are on the same page that I will be taking the students outside sometimes. My administration is on board as well. When I do take them outside, I have to take a walkie-talkie that's accessible from our office so that they can encourage us to take kids outside. I have a good idea what allergies they have and things like that. So if I have a student who, for example, is allergic to bee stings and we unfortunately have that experience, I know to send them immediately to the clinic and not see how it goes.
Rub some dirt in it. It'll be fine.
Yeah, right. Safety with lab equipment as well. Kids shouldn't be roughhousing around lab equipment. And so in middle school, that doesn't usually mean fire or things that look especially dangerous, but wearing goggles for things that can splash into eyes and having expectations for how kids behave and cooperate with one another is really important for a successful science classroom. And it's something that at the beginning of the year, teachers should spend that little bit of time on because it sets them up for success later in the year as the kids know what the expectations are for handling equipment and for working cooperatively with one another. So that whole idea that we share lab equipment and that when one person is the materials manager, they're the one that goes and gets the equipment and returns the equipment. We don't have everybody up at once. Mm-hmm. Setting up those kinds of expectations early on is also very valuable for a safe and successful and fun science year for everybody.
Right. And I obviously highly recommend that for the elementary school so that by the time they get to you, they're already trained. See, that's what makes your life easier if the elementary school teachers are doing it too. So,
absolutely fabulous.
All of that, that's great advice. Well, the NMLSTA, which is a difficult acronym. I complained about it before. Very hard to say. But obviously, you support middle-level science teachers. And one of the things that we want to talk about is that it feels to me, as an outsider looking in, my wife runs a school. She's the administrator for a school, an elementary school. And teacher burnout seems to be, since the pandemic especially, kind of a large topic. Teachers really feeling the pressure and all that kind of stuff. So as we head back to school, have you noticed an increase in teacher burnout? And if so, how do you help teachers sort of like maybe get themselves ready for the year? And what kind of resources does the NMLSTA offer?
I have made that observation as well. See, using that science vocabulary. There is a lot of teacher burnout. There's a lot of stress. There are many things that teachers are responsible for, not just the teaching and not just the curriculum. Specifically to the NMLSTA, see, it rolls off your tongue when you just roll that NM together.
That's why you're president.
We offer monthly webinars. We offer classroom teacher awards quarterly to members and a big award annually to members. So there are some things that we do specifically for our members. We have also on our website ideas of the month and classroom ideas and solicit those from people. So we do things to give teachers more resources, more options, more things to try out. In general, as far as teacher burnout is concerned, I think that we need to be pretty intentional about understanding our situation. It goes back to organizational thinking again, is to be clear on what we're doing and where our limits are. So teachers have to understand what they have to do for themselves. I personally, if I don't read something that's not schoolwork during the week, if I don't spend some time just immersed in a book, I'm not sane. So I know what I need, and so that's a valuable thing for teachers to give themselves to. They also have to advocate if there's so much going on that they need help. They have to be able to ask for help. Depends on the administration whether or not that's available, but sometimes we muddle through because we think we have to,
Right.
and then we find out that there really is help. Asking for help is okay and
I would assume
valuable.
support from your other teachers who are also in your school, things like that. I wonder, just groups like that, because it just does seem to be a bigger thing these days. And teachers, overall, I think are incredibly selfless people. And then we expect a ton of them. And so I think their work-life balance is way out of whack so many times. So I think that's very important moving forward for them to, take that back a little bit. Like you said, read a book, go
Absolutely.
outside, see
Read
a
a
movie,
book,
go do something else. Yeah.
go for a walk, exercise, clean out your mind. Absolutely, those things are important. And in fact, I find that I have to reset my brain before I sleep at night. I sleep much better if I read something or watch something or do something separate, not on a blue screen, but do something separate so that I don't go to sleep thinking about the kids or the work or the lessons or whatever, because then that's what I dream about, and that's not so restful.
Then you wake up. Did I sleep? What happened?
Exactly.
How about for teachers who may not feel necessarily supported by their school or their district? Are there resources that they can have, people they can reach out to?
That's a good question. I'm so supported by the NMLSTA, but also by my peers. And so that's been really valuable. And when that's not available, when somebody doesn't have a good peer group at work or doesn't have a supportive family, that makes for very stressful times. But as I say, turning off the school is important. And by that, exercise, even walking with trees around, walking in some place that's a natural setting, really does do a whole lot to bring down the stress, take up the endorphins, make a person feel healed to a degree that we need. Absolutely, we need.
I would think also there must be online groups of teachers who support one another, science groups they can join, things like that. Important having that sort of fellowship back and forth.
I'm sure that's the case. And I am affiliated, as you said, with the NMLSTA, but the NMLSTA is also affiliated with the NSTA, National Science Teaching Association, and the NSTA is very, very rich in resources, not necessarily a person to talk to, but ways to solve problems. So there are even listservs to ask questions. So just to put a question out there, I'll get emails from a middle school teacher that's just put out there, how do all of you out there address this question or solve this problem? And so that ability to hear from other people, to connect with other people, that's also a valuable healing mechanism.
I want to go back to wrap up with the idea of back in the classroom. Doing my research on you, I saw that you are one of, I believe, the only person I know now who has been to Greenland, which I think is very, very cool. You went on a science research mission about climate change. So obviously environmental science, very important to you. How can teachers bring that in, a very important subject moving forward? How do we bring that into the classroom, probably right from the beginning of the year?
Are you talking about climate change specifically or environmental science?
I would say environmental science overall. I mean, both. But
right.
Do you have any suggestions of how to approach that and how to go about it?
I do, absolutely. Environmental science sort of is a connector for lots of aspects of science. So there are many things that I do that then I make connections to what's happening in the world. So even basic chemistry and energy and the non-biological sciences support how the world works. So I make those connections often in the classroom, but I also take kids outside as often as I can, which in the beginning of the school year, when I do soil science and the beginnings of ecology and water science, I can take kids outside for different kinds of experiences. So different teachers have different resources available. I have marvelous outdoor resources. Some people do not. But taking kids outside at all gives them a chance to put those lessons into context. So if you're studying energy and you talk about reflection, and then you go outside and you look at albedo, there's an albedo app on any smartphone, albedo, a reflectance app. Really easy to use, a very simple lesson, but just going outside and seeing something in context, going outside and looking where water runs off the building when it rains, whether you are in a city building with downspouts and sewer drains, or whether you have water going to ditches, just seeing how the system works, just seeing what happens outside makes connections between basic sciences and kids' daily experiences. And if you can connect what to them is a classroom lesson on a basic subject and put it into a context where they see it in action, then the science makes more sense. It feels more valuable to them. They feel more connected and they're more interested. And that's what we want, right? Is we want kids to ask questions and figure out how to find the answers to those questions, which they can do if they have just some basic science understanding and some observational skills.
Well, Dr. Schoeffler, your enthusiasm, I'm sure, is contagious. Teachers, I'm sure, are mostly very excited to get back to school and start tackling these things, and you've given us some really, really good things. So I'd like to thank you so much for being here.
This has been quite a wonderful experience, Tom. This is great.
It's time for science, and it's time to continue talking about school readiness for the upcoming school year. With me is Rachel Arbor, the Director of Environmental Education at the Garrison School in the Garrison Union Free School District in New York. In recognition of her unique and innovative approach to teaching, Rachel was presented with an EPA Presidential Award just last month and recently coordinated a youth climate summit for students across New York and Connecticut. Rachel's here to talk about getting your classroom ready for the upcoming school year, how to get yourself ready, and how going outdoors can be a great way to start off the year with science. So, Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
You also got a Green Ribbon Award. You're just getting crazy awards. What was that one?
Yeah, so that was for my school district. It was through the Department of Education, and we just celebrated a fantastic week in DC last week. Partnered with the EPA, the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, NOAA, and the Smithsonian. And the award is for schools and districts and secondary institutions, post-secondary institutions, who meet 3 pillars of sustainability. Our environmental education program was really exciting. It was a great program to be a part of the application. And we also have the other 2 pillars talk about infrastructure for schools and their districts and how they can be greenified, and health taking place in schools for teachers and students.
Perfect. Well, you are the absolute perfect person to be talking about this kind of stuff, because the school year is coming and everybody's got to get set up, and I'm sure it's a daunting task for teachers. You're probably super excited and also a little bit looking at the mountain and wondering, how am I going to climb that thing? So the general topic, what thoughts and challenges come to your mind when you're going to start up a new year for your kids and your classroom?
Yeah, I think you just described it really well. Thinking about, oh my gosh, I have 9 months ahead of me. It's a huge mountain that I have to cross. And I think when I first started teaching, my mother-in-law, my in-laws are both former teachers, and they told me, as long as you're more than a day ahead of the students, you're golden. So I think thinking about trying to break it down, and the more planned out you are, the better. But, teaching, you have to be on and you have to be ready to be flexible. So things almost never go to plan. So as long as you have one day ahead of you, I think that's really easy, bite-sized pieces that you can digest.
I've always said it's really good to have a plan, and it's really good to throw it out just as it happens.
Yes.
You got to start with the plan,
Exactly.
but be ready to get rid of it too. Do you have any
Yeah.
general tips and tricks for setting up your classroom, making things organized, have things ready to go? What kind of things do you do for that? Because science often has a lot of things to it. So what are your approaches to that?
Honestly, my approach may be atypical for a science teacher, but teachers spend during the year more time in their classroom oftentimes than they do at home. So I think it should be just as welcoming an environment for you as the teacher as it should be for your students. So it's like moving into a new house. My first process is always to figure out how can I make this space something that I want to be in. So in my last district, I had hanging lights that had fake like plants wrapped around them. It was like this Italian eatery. It was beautiful. And I think I think that's kind of typical for my try to bring nature into the classroom. But I think having things that people can connect with, like my summer travels, I usually try to integrate them into the classroom, into the conversation too. So students don't feel like there's such a disconnect between their summer adventures and what they like to do outside of school as what they do inside of school. I think it's just as important to organize your teaching tools as it is to organize your space in a way that you feel like really represents you.
I would think that would make kids feel, excited to go to your classroom, the lights and the things like that. Nothing's just stark, boring, sort of the same classroom. That's gotta help kids. One of the things that I read up about you is that they praise you're dealing with the social emotional needs and environmental connection to each student, which I think is obviously a part of the whole process.
Yeah, it absolutely is. You're talking to people, not just students in your class. So I think that's, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What are my students needing before we can even think about teaching them, before they take in new information? Are they hungry? Are they tired? Are they still coming down from this great overnight that they had a couple days ago? And I think that idea of reading the room, not just in the infrastructure you have set up, but in your students in the community that you have in front of you is key to setting up a great year, really getting a community feel with your students.
Especially right from the get-go. They're coming from summer, how crazy has that been for them if they were able to go anywhere at all? Some of them might just be really excited to get back to school because they didn't do anything in the summer, but so the whole environment's got to be good. So you're considering this is your specialty, and we're going to come back to that because you do a lot of training of teachers and obviously, evangelizing the wonderful things about the climate and environmental education. But are there lessons and activities you do like right from the get-go to just kind of get kids, ready to go, and maybe something that's not, just is more fun to get them outdoors? What are the kind of things, the tips that you could give to teachers to maybe start your year off?
Definitely. Yeah. I always start with some kind of team building activity. So I teach an environmental STEAM program, and the first thing I like to do is have a real world issue that they could solve right off the bat together, because learning never takes place individually. We're learning, it does like for a test, but right. In real world, you're often collaborating with people beyond your immediate circle so that you can build something together. And I think it's really vital to be able to build that community right off the bat and really lower the stakes. I always like to think middle school as a place in which it's okay to fail, because that's when you're starting to figure out your process as a student. So to have projects and activities that students, the only stakes are here's a real world issue and how can you solve it, rather than, oh my gosh, I'm scared, I'm not supporting my team enough, I'm not get a good grade on this. Really, the only problem is the real world that you can bring from the outside world into your classroom. I think that is the best way to start off the year, again, so that students not only feel connected with their world beyond it, but also so they see the relevance, so they're working as a team to achieve a common goal. I think any kind of activity that gets students doing together is a great way to start off the year.
Another thing I read that I thought was great, part of the description of why you got the EPA award was that you had projects like the school's nutrition program and food waste, a clothing swap as an opportunity to share with the public the negative impact of fast fashion, a pollinator garden for the importance of pollinators and monarch migration, which I just did a video for FOSS actually. I'm reading all this stuff and I'm tired. I don't know how you keep all this up. We're going to come back to that. But those are like very real world, very concrete things. What is the advantage for that? Why does that work for you with the kids?
Yeah, it is one of the most challenging parts of my job because I'm building the content oftentimes with students as we go. But in the long run, it becomes the most meaningful because in a typical science classroom, you have a really stringent set of standards and units that you have to meet in a certain amount of time. But in my environmental STEAM program, I can kind of leave it up to the kids and ask them, what are issues you see in your real world that you would like to solve, and what tools do we need to solve them? So those 3 projects you just listed, the composting, the pollinator garden, the clothing swap, those were products of students' ideas. And we thought, okay, we actually had done a debate in my environmental STEAM class in 8th grade leading up to the clothing swap, in which I asked them, should Taylor Swift have to pay for her impact on climate change? Because in 2022 alone, just her private jet, not including any other aspect of her life, contributed 500 lifetimes worth of a carbon footprint in just the 1 year from just her private jet. So the question was, what should the responsibility be of an individual? And those who were in favor of she should have to pay, they had to define what paying is. Is that jail time? Is that money donated to certain environmental NGOs?
And I don't know, if you suggest Taylor Swift goes to jail, that could be trouble. I don't know. A lot of people will fight you.
No, but it brought up some really great points. I mean, I love Taylor Swift's music, but it is really important for us to evaluate what is our personal impact on our environment and what should our behavior be moving forward, knowing that impact. So the students who were against saying she shouldn't have to pay talked about our amendments and how can individuals be expected to pay when corporations aren't paying. And then the people who said she should have to pay were talking about just the domino effect of someone's carbon footprint on climate change, including ecosystems on land all the way to marine ecosystems and how CO2 is affecting our global ecosystem as a whole. And that really led us into the topic of fast fashion, of people who are going to her Eras tour are encouraged to get like those bracelets or those t-shirts that they wear once and then they don't wear again because they don't have the opportunity. And that really led students down the path of, oh my gosh, I had no idea how detrimental fast fashion was. What can we do about it in our own community? And that's when we came up with the idea of a clothing swap, and we got the community involved. My students researched 5 different environmental organizations locally to globally that people could donate to if they wanted to, but it was free to enable full access no matter where you're coming from. And it was so inspiring. It was a ton of work, but the students drove that learning process. And I think the opportunity for them to take what's happening, the problems that they see and feel powerless about, and be able to enact solutions in the classroom it's the highlight of my career to be able to provide opportunities like that. So I can say with so much confidence that if a teacher has the time and ability to do that, it is going to be immediate buy-in for those students, and they're going to remember it for the rest of their lives. That's something that they did, that they were able to do in school. They brought the community together and they solved something real. And I could talk about that for the whole podcast.
Well, the concept comes up time and time again about tailoring it to your local area, which is so important because it gives kids real context. And the whole concept of think globally but act locally, I love that.
Yeah.
So that drives that home. I want to come back to that, but I was going to go one more question on the K. You mentioned middle school, but we talk often about a lot of our listeners are elementary school teachers who may not have a science background. I was just wondering if you could have any kind of words or encouragement or tips or tricks for them. What's something simple they can do for science, especially if they have no real background in it?
Yeah, I mean, I am a huge fan. I mean, you're going to hear this over and over. I think the more meaning that students can derive from their learning, the better it's going to be for teachers and students. So if you felt like you had flexibility in your curriculum and you could ask students what they want to learn about most, I think you can enhance your science curricula with great simulations. PHET, PHET, out of CU Boulder. They make fantastic science simulations that take these really abstract thoughts and they put them in really digestible simulations that students all the way at the kindergarten level can understand. So that's a way to take concepts that feel really foreign and translate them into a palatable way for students. But then there are things like nature journaling, when you can go outside or take again, take that real life and bring it into your classroom, because everything we know from science comes from our understanding of nature. So the more you can bring those experiences through great field trips, through partnering with these companies that do the field trips longer term, I think the more you can, again, bring nature into your classroom, the more invested your students are going to be in science. And you don't need to be a science expert to be able to teach third graders science. Your goal is to provide students the opportunity to make connections between what's happening in their world and what's happening in the classroom.
Yeah. The more I do this, I come from an art background, so that was always the fun class for me. But science is the same kind of thing. It's just like, it gets kids very excited if you do it right. I think, I grew up with science was like, learn these 7 facts and regurgitate them back to me. So I love this. I love that your students are creating the curriculum in some levels. That's fantastic. I think this ties into, especially acting locally. You were talking about, before we started, there's a project that you're involved in, another project, again, making me tired, but about locally New York, with working with the local area in the Hudson Valley. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that this is very specifically about where you are, but I'm sure it's the kind of program that could be expanded nationally or exists nationally. I wanted you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my program is at the Garrison Union Free School District, but I have learned in my years of being there just how much students are responding to this type of interdisciplinary programming. And I want to bring up that word interdisciplinary because I think the idea of nature connection, it doesn't feel translatable to a lot of teachers across content areas, right? That sounds more like a science concept, but if you're in a social studies classroom, the idea of an ecosystem services mentality, the way we view the environment for its intrinsic value of like, oh, I can go mine gold here, I can go sit under that tree. Those are things that nature is giving to us. That's an ecosystem services mentality. And that mentality has really impacted history. Like the age of exploration in the 1500s, when Europeans were exploring different countries, that's what they were thinking about. What is corn and how can I use it in my daily lives? What about chocolate? Things like that. So I think bringing this type of interdisciplinary programming, that's just an example of how it might look in social studies. In ELA, it might be enhancing your personal narrative unit through sensory details while nature journaling outside. In math, it might be quantifying changes in population based on endangered species. All of those are examples of entry points into your curriculum with environmental education. And the reason I bring those up is because I love this school district I'm working for and building this program for, and it's worked. The students are responding. 33 students this year volunteered lunch and recess and homework for like 3 months leading up to this Youth Climate Summit. And it's because these learning experiences are ingrained in their daily lives. And seeing how much of a success the program is in my district, I want to be able to bring that to every district through curated curriculum, through professional development for teachers, through partnerships with informal educational organizations that lead field trips, because they really don't have opportunities to talk with teachers in the classroom, right? You're like booking a field trip, you book it for that one day, check, done. And that's fantastic. That's wonderful. Those students really need those connections. But my company, I started a company to bring this type of programming to other districts called Gaia Scholastic. And my company's goal is to bridge the gap between those informal and formal educational environments and to support educators in all realms in integrating this environmental literacy into their daily learning experiences with students, because I can't think of a bigger real world problem that we need to solve than the global climate crisis that affects every single person. And if our goal as teachers is to prepare students for the real world, I think this is a really important problem to be prepared for. And environmental literacy it's a huge asset of global citizens of our future. And any way we can support them, I'm just excited to be a part of. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to talk about it, because I really believe in it.
Well, I think that even just the things you were talking about, the kids giving up their lunches and their recesses to create this climate summit, I mean, that's, that gives them, they'll remember that forever, like you said. I mean, that's like, hey, I can make a difference. Because I think a lot of people feel, oh, I don't know what I can do. And if they've already done that at this young age, that's amazing. That's a wonderful thing. I want to go back real quick and talk a little, we were mentioning, this comes up a lot now, especially post-pandemic, is teacher burnout. I mean, you are obviously a person, you've got, I think, 3, 4, 7 jobs, somewhere in that neighborhood. And, you're obviously very enthusiastic about this, but surely there are times when you have to keep that work-life balance thing going as teachers are sort of burnt out after the pandemic and all the pressure that's been put on them. Do you have any words for that? If somebody came to you and says, man, I just don't know if I can do this year, what kind of a thing would you say to somebody?
Yeah, a few things. One, I think take it one step at a time. Like what I said before is be one day ahead of the kids. It can often feel like my husband is a teacher also, and we say the work would never end if you let it. So having those boundaries of leaving your work at the door and then coming in fresh as much as that's possible, I think that's really essential for mental health, because otherwise I feel like that's something I've struggled with a lot in my career, is having that work-life balance, because I'm like super adventurous Rachel for the summer, and then I'm really hardworking Rachel for the school year. And I think that can be a really dangerous dichotomy. So as much as it's an exhausting concept to do things beyond school, I think maintaining those activities in your life that feel really enriching, for me, it's obviously going outside. I think those are things you need to build into your schedule, and just know those things can wait. The email can wait until tomorrow, and setting that boundary, I think, is really helpful, because ultimately the endless workload it comes from wanting to support our students, and that is incredible. But in order to support our students, we need to be able to be in our best form of health to be able to show up for other people. So I think taking that time for you is really necessary before you can give that time to other people.
Right. There's nothing wrong with sitting down with a cup of tea and reading a book. It's okay.
Yeah.
Give yourself permission to watch a TV show. It's all right. It's okay. And as if all these other things weren't enough, you have like a third job, which is subject to climate, which is, could you explain that? Because that sounded really interesting to me about specifically for the Hudson Valley area, but I think it would apply to a lot of different things. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I could talk forever about Subject to Climate, because they are such an amazing team full of really qualified, impassioned people. And the whole goal of this organization is to bring climate education to every classroom for free. So they provide anything from like a word wall about climate concepts to a full 3-day lesson plan equipped with a slideshow and student resources and teacher tips, and everything in between, including professional development for teachers. So what's really exciting is, even though it's a global company, since different states throughout the U.S. have begun to pass mandates about climate change being taught in classrooms, this organization, along with my own organization, is able to work with those departments of education in those states and provide those resources for teachers. So, okay, you have these new mandates. Oh my gosh, I don't know anything about climate change. Well, here is professional development about figuring out what climate change is so you can feel environmentally literate. And then here are all of these thousands and thousands of heavily vetted lesson plans that you can implement regardless of your content area, anything from music and art to science, math, and social studies and ELA. It's got it all, regardless of grade level. So it's a really wonderful organization. And what's so exciting about it in New York this year is that we are opening up a New York State hub on August 28th. The website is launching, and that's going to have content specific to New York State ecosystems. So the Long Island Sound, the Hudson Valley, all of these ecosystems that make our state really special, we're going to have content heavily vetted by teachers, made by teachers, and then heavily vetted to be put on the site that applies directly to the content that we're teaching in the classroom. So if you're wondering, well, yeah, I would love to teach environmental concepts, but I don't understand where it might fit, Subject to Climate is a great way to get started, to show you, hey, here is a quick do now that would be able to integrate these quick conversations, or here's a longer term project. Either way, it fits with the standards that you already have to teach. It's not doing an additional thing. It's doing what you already do through an environmental lens. And that, again, that idea of being interdisciplinary is really essential in integrating environmental literacy, because we are so stretched thin as teachers. We have so many things that we need to do already. How can we be expected to do something additional? Well, the whole point is that it's not additional. It's just a new perspective, a new way of doing what we're already doing. And maybe there are things that we're already doing in our classroom that we feel like could use some spicing up. That's a great first step into, okay, I don't really love the way I do this lesson or this unit. How might I be able to change it? Here are tons of resources for how, and you can plug them directly into your classroom.
We love good resources, especially free resources for teachers. But I also really like that it's very specific. I mean, obviously it should be, they'll probably expand to other areas, but if you're in the New York area, what a great thing to make it so relatable to the kids too. And as somebody who was born and lived in New York, I always think it's funny that people forget there's a state of New York, because you say New York, everyone thinks the city is like, New York is a beautiful, amazing outdoor state, like the third largest dairy state in the union, all this kind of stuff. So it's always funny to me if people's like, New York. I'm like, yes, there's more to it than just Manhattan. It's okay. So Rachel, this has been great. You are so knowledgeable about this and so passionate about it. And I think that it's definitely the kind of thing that will help teachers start their new year with maybe a new, an energized view of the world, and to get their kids outside. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it is my pleasure. I could talk about this all day, and in fact, I've chosen to. So thank you so much. Really, I just want teachers to feel like this isn't such a huge burden to have to teach climate change in their classrooms. And I just want to show them that whatever route you take in getting there, it is possible. You don't need to start from scratch. There are tons of people and resources who are here to help already. So thank you so much for letting me get the word out.
It's Time for Science is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lipman and Tom Racine, and is sponsored by School Specialty and FOSS, the Full Option Science System, at the Lawrence Hall of Science, UC Berkeley. Be sure to check out FOSS over on Facebook and Twitter.